Thank you, Narachi. Good evening. My name is Bhasskar and I am an alcoholic.
Hi,
Hi
Bhasskar.
Bhaskar.
It's God's grace and one fellowship. I am sober today. I am actually kind of privileged to share about this topic on sponsorship. And what I'm going to share right now is going to be a bit on what I have understood about it from my own experience, what I have been heard from some seniors, and basically for me there are two aspects of being when it comes to sponsorship. One being a sponsee, and then becoming a sponsor. So for me, my journey initially in AA, I've been now in recovery for the past 17 and a half years, by the grace of God, one day at a time. And my journey in AA was a very difficult path in the beginning because I came way back in 1999 for the first time after drinking for 16, 17 years. And I looked at AA at that time with a lot of skepticism. I was not very thrilled about coming to an AA meeting. First of all, I had my doubts whether I was an alcoholic, A. And secondly, my problem was that when I entered the AA meetings, I found the people sitting there and sharing to be self-righteous. And I said to myself, okay, this is not for me. And I quietly walked out. And I think it was a couple of years, 1.5 years later, I tried a lot of combinations. I tried stopping on my own, went to rehabs, went to a rehab, went to 3 detoxes, and nothing worked. I always ended up getting drunk again. So finally, after my third detox, I decided let me give this AA thing a go again, and I came. But this time, what I did was I didn't do what I didn't do last time was that I started listening to members sharing without any judgmental thinking in my head about whether they're self-righteous or whatever they are. But for me, I just wanted to stop drinking. The initial few months in recovery was difficult for me because I had a lot of intellectual thinking. I did not subscribe to this thought of sponsor because for me, this word sponsor, I was very vague for me. It was very, people were talking about why didn't you take him as a sponsor? Why didn't you take that person as a sponsor? And I was saying to myself, well, why do I need a sponsor, first of all? I don't need anybody. Why should I go and talk about my past to somebody else? Let it go down in, deep down in my grave or get burnt. Why do I need to actually think about this whole thing of sponsorship? So I brushed it aside, and somewhere down the line, I heard somebody sharing that that whatever you share in the meeting is like you're doing your fourth step, and if you're listening, you're doing your fifth step. It was very convenient at that time for me. So I said, okay, let me continue with this. Some few months went by, and there was a lot of pressure from a lot of my AA members asking me, have you taken a sponsor? Have you taken a sponsor? And I was still not keen on it, but just for the sake of keeping them outside, I said, yeah, I have a sponsor. And I used somebody's name. The person who 12-stepped me as his name, and I told him he's my sponsor, just to get people out of my back. Still, I've not subscribed to the thought of having a sponsor. A year went by, a year and a few months went by, and I was not drinking, but my life was definitely not as good as I thought it would be and what people were sharing. I read in the big book, it said, no, if you have what we want and you're ready to go to get it, you must go any lengths to get it, then, you should be ready to take certain steps. And some of these we barked. But at that moment, I thought this step work again was something which I can do it on my own. I don't need to go and share anybody about my past because my past is something which I didn't want people to know. But grace of God, what happened was that my feeling of being completely out of the program, feeling very, very back to the same feeling of not happy. I don't want to drink. No, I don't want to drink. But I don't want to. Also, I didn't know how to live. So that's the time when I met my late sponsor. I had only one sponsor then from all my many years in recovery. I never changed my sponsor till he passed away. So I met my sponsor then, and his name was Krishna I, in one of the meetings. I used to meet him in meetings quite often, but I used to never talk to him directly. I decided to go and approach him and speak to him about doing the step work and will he be my sponsor and all that. That man had a very nice, very clear opinion about me or clear idea about me. He just said, I was waiting for you to come and talk to me, you arrogant, blah, blah, blah. He used those words. And I left it and I said, oh, hello, why is this guy coming and talking to me like that? My ego was getting bruised here. But then I heard from a lot of people that he's one of the very, or they, in that time they used to use the word, one of the best sponsors you can ever get and all that. So I said, okay, let me go and anyway, let's hear him out. And I spoke to him, whatever he gave me, all that. And then later on, he told me that, okay, what do you want to do? I told him I would like to work my steps. He said, why do you want to work your steps? Stay away from the drink enough, You don't need to go work your steps. That's the reason you come to AA, right? That's why you keep sharing every time that I have stopped drinking. But you never shared about anything else. I said, yeah, that's true. But right now my life is miserable because even though I stopped drinking, things at home is not looking good. I'm still having problems finding a job. I am trying to find some kind of a relationship. It's not happening. So he said to me that nothing is going to happen to you, buddy, unless you start changing your life. And the only way you can do that is when you actually get into the 12 steps of recovery. I said, okay, let me do it. My first experience with Krishna was very, very interesting because I remember speaking to him this on a Friday, and he asked me to come on a Monday morning at 10 o'clock to his residence to start on the step work. I went 15 minutes late, and I stay almost like 20 kilometers away from his house, and 20 kilometers in Bangalore is like it's like one going to another country. So I decided to go. Anyway, I went there, I was 15 minutes late, and I rang the bell. He looked at me and he said that, what time is it? I told him it's 10:15. What time I asked you to come? You come at 10 o'clock. Go home, come tomorrow. Ouch, it hurt me a lot. I said, I've come all this way and this man is telling me to go back and come tomorrow. Anyway, I said, okay, fine, let me do what I have to do, and I went back. So next day I decided let me come a bit early, and I reached by 9:45. And I rang the bell at 9:45. He said to me, what time is it now? It's 9:45. What am I asked you to come? 10 o'clock. You wait till 10 o'clock. Then I realized that, okay, I have to be there on time. And I understood why he was doing this to me because, coming into AA and being an alcoholic for all my life, I realized that I could not value other people's time. I did not give that much of, care for people, their time, about anybody else. It's all about me, all about me. So finally, we got cracking on the step work. And the first thing he asked me that I asked him, what is the sponsor business? Now, this is what I was told about from him to me, which I will share now. It may contradict to a lot of people's point of view or something, but this is what I have understood when he told me this. He said to me that in the earlier days of recovery, when there was not much of growth in AA, only a few groups were around, and there was no rehabs at that time. What they did was few senior people or members who were already in recovery in the program used to help the person who's trying to get in the program into recovery. And what they used to do is and it says in our big book also that an alcoholic needs to be at least sometime physically away needs medical treatment before he can get into the program. She get into the program. So they used to, admit people in the Salvation Army hospitals because that's where the only place they could go in those days. And that time, in that institution used to demand 3 months, upfront money to take care of the person. And so the person who used to take him there used to pay for the person who want to recover, and that's how the word sponsor came up. He told me that. And it also came up to the point where he said that person used to, give him the helping hand to bring him into the program, like bridging him into the program. One of those very nice forms of acronyms, I'm not sure what they call it as. Like sponsor is a sober person offering newcomer support of recovery. And that made sense. That made a lot of sense because being a newcomer there and having no idea what this program is all about, I discovered my sponsor and he gave me a good time talking about everything. And he told me to write down about my past. I wrote down my past. I wrote down everything. And we started doing the step work. What I did realize by doing it through my sponsor and not on my own. A lot of people had told me to do it on my own, which I thought of doing it, but I didn't do it on my own. Reason is because I was very, very clear to rationalize everything. I did this because of that person, because of that situation. I was not very happy because this person did this to me because I did this to this person because he did that to me. There was no third party perspective about my life. It was very easy to con myself, very easy to be dishonest with myself, and very easy to rationalize everything about myself. So his inputs, that lovely man's inputs, Krishna Iyer's inputs, and Krishna Iyer's inputs for me was fantastic because he gave me a different perspective about my defects. He told me that character defects is not something which, being acquired and this and all that. He told me that it's already there, boss. The only problem with your character defect is that it is characters that were used defective. You need to do a lot of unlearning. And he showed me exactly the right approach to everything there. And what happens was for me in that moment of doing it with somebody else, my fourth and fifth, all my steps basically, and especially the fifth step with the sponsor, who also happens to be an alcoholic, can understand my situation. It's said now if you want you can go and share it to go to a priest, or you can go share it to somebody else. But for me, I felt that when I shared everything with my sponsor, who happened to be an alcoholic himself, it made it more easier for me because he could understand from where I'm coming from. The beauty about this whole thing about sponsorship between a sponsee and a sponsor, I've come to understand at that time, is the love, the bonding that happens between them both. And also the beauty about the trust that develops. I could find for the first time in my life, like he told me that he wanted me to stand stark naked in front of him. I had no issues in doing that at all. What he meant was to stand completely open. I did it. And I found it so trustworthy. I found him so comfortable that I could share everything to him. Best part was that he never judged me for any of my past mistakes or past life I lived in, or the idiocies I did. He always had a compassionate thinking to the whole thing. He was not a person he was not a counselor. He was a guide for me in a sense that he always shared what he had gone through, his experience at those moments on a similar situation, and which was similar to mine, but with only names and places changed. And I could understand, I could really feel it. He was a tough sponsor, and I guess that's what made me also to become a very tough sponsor. A sponsor being tough is not a person who was trying to put down the sponsee, which I learned again. The tough sponsor is the one who gives tough love. I'm an alcoholic who can, fool around, who try to play around and try to, manipulate things. But a tough sponsor like my sponsor who was there, and he looked at me straight and said, stop all this bullshit. The funny thing is that after all those time spending with him for almost like a month doing my step work and interacting with him, and then afterwards almost like 3-4 months spending time with him, I said to myself that now I don't need anybody else. Now that I know everything. I don't need anybody. So I closed my books, burnt whatever he asked me to burn, and then I just moved away. I did not call him back. I did not refer to him anything. And suddenly the miracles of the initial euphoria of doing the step work started happening in my life. I got a job. I got, I found a relationship in a girl. And I thought life is good. I don't need anything anymore now. I can just carry on. I don't need any sponsor. But the best part was that almost like a year and a half since I spoke to him, the job which I had, they threw me out. The girl, which I thought was a relationship, called me brother and walked away. And I was in a complete state of shock and depression. So I reached out to him again and I told him, Krishna, this is what I'm going through. And he said, I knew you were going to go through this. Because he told me one thing that, and a sponsor is a person who's like a rudder in a boat or the steering wheel in the car. You might have everything. You might have petrol filled up. You might have the most luscious interiors. You might have the most powerfulest engine, everything. But unless there is a steering wheel, you're not going to go ahead anywhere. And that's what a sponsor's role is, to help you steer to where you want to go. And that made sense. And then I understood the value of having a sponsor. The value of having a sponsor is somebody who can guide me in through the forest where I'm completely lost. Now, I don't expect the world to, I don't get lost in the world, or the world doesn't, make me lose my way. I lose my way through my own complications. I lose my way by complicating everything in my life. The most simplest things, I can look at, it's very complicated for me. To unwind those threads is where I find a sponsor to be very helpful for. Many years have gone by, and now I have another sponsor who's as tough as Krishna, who's I required, who has helped me in my service, who's helped me in my own personal recovery, who's helped me at the time when I went through my own personal loss. And he's there. Whenever I want, I reach out to him. Now, being a sponsor on my own, what was my experience as being a sponsor? I learned one thing about sponsorship. Sponsorship is where true anonymity comes in the way. The actual essence of anonymity, the spiritual foundation of all our traditions and all our aspects about helping out, the 12th step, that I have to be anonymous. It's not only my own personal anonymity here, it's the personal anonymity of my sponsors are very important. I don't have to go tell around everybody in the meeting that I got 100 sponsors, 200 sponsors, or 500 sponsors. It's none of my business. Nor do I need to go and start pointing out people and saying, "Oh, look at that guy, he's my sponsor, that's why he's doing so well." No, it's none of my business. Because whatever the sponsee gets in his life, in or her life, it is their credit. It's only to them. My late sponsor told me one thing. He said, "Bhasskar, I have 10 sponsees right now, for example. 2 of them relapse. Is it my fault?" I said, "No, sir, it's not your fault. How can you say it is your fault? And the same case, how can I take credit for those 8 who are doing very well?" Same breath, I understand that the role of the sponsee is just like an electrician. I mean, sponsors like an electrician. There's a lot of electric work going on in my house, so I can speak about that. Is that there is a wire, there is a switch, somebody needs to give the connection. And the sponsor, being an electrician who understands the concept of wiring, connects the wire to the switch, that is higher power to the sponsee, and leaves it, goes away. It's up to the sponsee now to put it on or put it off. And if there's a problem in putting on, putting off, he calls back the sponsor. The sponsor can't give any job to anybody. A sponsor cannot lend money. A sponsor cannot be a family counselor to go and talk to his wife and tell that how good or how bad he is, or give a certificate, character certificate. No, the role of the sponsor is to help the sponsee specifically to the sponsee's problems, specifically to the sponsee's issues, and specifically to the spiritual aspect of this program. That is what I have understood, getting into recovery and getting into being a sponsor myself. Do I have trouble with sometimes with sponsees? Yes. A lot of times sponsees have come back and give me a lot of blasting, saying that, "What the hell do you think of yourself? What do you know? You're an old man. You don't know anything what I'm going through." Well, I can't help it. I can only help out in what information I get. If I'm true to my sponsor and I give the right information, the right the true honesty about what's really happening, only then can I expect the sponsor to give me back a proper answer, a clear perspective. But it happens, and it's not that the sponsor is some kind of a person who's like a god or something. No, sponsor, I understood, is also a sponsor is another alcoholic just like me, who has got their own problems, who's also got a sponsor on their own. So I need to understand the essence of all these things before I start pointing fingers at a sponsor. Because sponsors cannot be doing all these things. And for me, the beauty about this whole getting into this sponsorship is I think for me, it's the most essential and the very first act of service in AA. The very first act of service to give to and spend time with another person, like how when somebody spent time with me, and also the time I spend time with, giving the answers to that person, because every time a sponsee talks to me about their problem, it reiterates the fact that how much problems I've got. And it also gives me, and I share a solution to the sponsee, I suddenly realize that, yeah, this is also my solution to the problem. I was told that I have to keep doing my step works many, many, many times. Only then can I review, I can wire out everything out. What I've understood is by every time I work with a sponsee doing their step work, I am doing my step work again. I've seen so many times that when I'm sitting and when the person writing their steps, I said, "Good God, man, this is where I also have done this. Why didn't this come into my head when I did my step work with my sponsor?" That is the essence of one alcoholic helping out the other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. The preamble says that I need to stay sober and help another alcoholic to achieve sobriety. The only way I can help the other alcoholic to achieve sobriety is by helping them to go through the step work if they want it. I cannot force sponsorship on anybody else. Just because I'm 17 and a half years sober doesn't make me a qualified and higher echeloned AA member. No, I am still that one member, alcoholic, who's struggling to live one day at a time and without a drink. Because that's what it is. The whole program is just one day at a time. And I cannot go around forcing around myself saying that, listen, I'll be your sponsor and all those things. People who love to sponsor, but needs to be approachable. My sponsor told me that. If I need to be the person people want to come and work the steps with, then I should be sharing in the meetings that what this step work has done to me in my life. How much has this step work helped me? How much of this step work is helping me? And how much is this step work is giving me a better life? And better life does not mean that I have a fantastic car or a bike, in quotes, okay, joke. But how much am I able to handle my situations today, what I'm going through with my difficulties? And handling them sober, serene, and with some kind of action that proves to be in common welfare, not a selfish thing. It is something which is so beautiful about sponsor, is that a lot of people first needs to get that judgment out that a sponsor is somebody who is, I learned one more thing, that a sponsor need not be having number of years in recovery. A lot of people say, no, I need somebody who's 15 years sober, I need somebody who's 17 years. I know people who have been 15 years, 17 years, 20 years sober, who are as worse in their recovery than a newcomer. I'm sorry, I'm not being judgmental, but I'm just talking about my experience. And I've seen some few people who have been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in sober, who are vastly or majorly much better spiritually connected, much better living their life, working the program much more better than a person like me. I do approach them and talk to them about my issues. There is no senior, junior, or anybody in AA. Everybody is the same. I learned that. There are times when I'm really, really going through a difficult time, I take one of my so-called sponsees to be my sponsor, and we have spent time talking to them about my issues. The relationship, again I said, sponsor-sponsee again, it's the only thing I can do is I can share. I can only expect somebody to give me some kind of a guidance. And it's remaining, I have to believe that there is a higher power which I believe will show me the direction with all the suggestions I have received from everybody else. In the end, I think ultimately for me, the best sponsor as years go by is God himself, which a lot of people have said that. But God does not speak through me through my mobile phone. God speaks to me through my people in the fellowship. People I need to approach to. People I need to talk to. People I need to respect and, give my wholehearted feelings to. Only then will I get my answers. They say, there's an old saying, trust in God, but tie your camel. Same way, I can trust in God, but if I don't go for meetings and if I don't spend time with my sponsor, if I don't spend time talking to other people, other newcomers, or anybody or any member in the fellowship, where am I going to find recovery? Recovery for me is very important, that I need to spend time with people, with members, and that's where the whole thing comes up. This whole program of recovery. What, how long? 50 minutes. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time to see how many minutes I've got before I keep my mouth shut. You know, because normally it's very weird for me to keep talking for such a long time, except in the board, which Anuragji might know. Okay, but coming back to this whole thing about this basic aspects about sponsorship. Again, there's also another thing about sponsorship is not only does it come when I talk to somebody else also. There, for a newcomer, especially for a newcomer, what I'm sharing right now is my experience of a newcomer also, is that the newcomer walks into the program, does not know who to talk to and what to talk to, but starts listening to the members sharing. And suddenly out of the blue, the group becomes his sponsor. Because the group starts sharing things that the newcomer wants to hear about how to stay away from the drink. If you have a problem, give me a call, and how each one is trying to help the newcomer to get into recovery. Sometime later, as time goes by, the newcomer starts making friends in the fellowship. He starts to, meet a few of them, and they start going for a cup of tea, cup of coffee outside, and and suddenly the newcomer starts talking about few things, and where his friends start talking the same thing back, and they become a small group. And then that also becomes like a group sponsorship going on. And then finally, the one-on-one that happens, the actual the actual sponsorship that goes on, the feeling of, one another, that bond, the trust, the love happens only when we start doing the step work. It's a journey that I think every AA member should go through to really find recovery. And to enjoy recovery. Finding recovery is one thing, but enjoying recovery is another thing. And enjoying recovery in the calamities that one is going through, that is something which cannot be missed. Recovery is not all, bed of roses, more of thorns in it. But to negotiate and navigate those thorny feelings and thorny days and those tough, difficult days, the sponsor comes in the way to help out, to steer the person away into the right path. And also, the good thing about being, in the fellowship and especially sponsoring, it's not just that sponsor is just a garbage can that I can keep calling them up and start talking and just throw everything off and then walk away. No. A sponsor and a sponsor relationship is different, because as much as I'm being a sponsor or a sponsee to my sponsor, I have to listen to my sponsor. A lot of times I just like to give all the gyan to him, use him as a dustbin, throw all the shit at him, sorry for the bad word, my apologies, and putting all that thing at him and then saying that, okay, thank you very much, good night, keeping the phone down. Not even willing to listen to what he's trying to tell me. Or am I calling up my sponsor just to vent out? Or am I calling my sponsor to look out for a solution? I have a few sponsees of mine who call me up and tell me straight away, listen, Bhasskar, it is going to be a venting session. Are you ready for it? And I'll tell them, yeah, okay, vent it out. You don't want anything from me? No. They say, no, I just want to vent out everything. I said, go ahead, vent. When they do that venting, right, I'm prepared. Okay, fine. They'll keep venting. Okay, chalo. And I'll say, good night. But if they want to ask me something, they'll tell me very clearly, listen, Bhasskar, I need your suggestion on this. Could you please tell me? And the best part is, I tell them before I tell you anything, are you willing to listen to my solution? I have to be willing to listen to those suggestions. I also have this bad habit of, because I don't like my sponsor giving me something which I don't want to listen. I don't want to hear it. It's more like, a sponsor will tell me something which will go against, my own way of doing things. And sometimes I know when I call up my sponsor, sometimes I know whether I'm seeking approval or seeking opinion. He'll ask me the same question and say, are you seeking approval or are you seeking my opinion? If you're seeking my approval, don't call me. But if you're going to seek my opinion, then listen to me. And then after listening to all that and saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, I end up going where? Going to somebody else and asking the same question, the same thing, hoping that the answer will be different. Insanity. But I like to go and ask. And that person who, friend of mine, will always say, yeah, go ahead, why not? I got my answer, fine, go ahead. There is a vast difference between a sponsor and a friend in AA. A sponsor is a person who has got no agendas, who has got nothing to gain from giving his valuable suggestions. It's got nothing to do. There's no motives attached to it. Friends may have it. Friends can always have some attachments, can have some motive behind the whole thing. There's another question popped in my head at that time. Can a sponsor and a sponsee be two different opposite sex? Can they work the steps? Can a woman have a male sponsor, or can a male sponsor have a woman sponsor? I don't know. Why not? Why not? I don't know. I had experiences of having women sponsees also, and I also understand that some have gone well, some have gone really bad. But that, in the end of the day, what is the motive? The motive behind any sponsorship is very clear in our preamble: to stay sober and help another alcoholic to achieve sobriety. The only problem I have realized in this sponsorship between a man and a woman, whether it is a sponsor or the sponsee, the affection grows to a point where it can be misunderstood. A sponsor may really have a lot of affection to his sponsees, which what happens is sometimes is that it can be misunderstood, or the vice versa. The sponsee may have a lot of affection to the sponsor, which the sponsor might misunderstand. So that is where the call needs to be taken. That is where the individual has to take a call on it and say that, should I do it or should I not do it? Or if it happens, what do I do about it? But in the end, it is a fellowship of men and women. It is not fellowship of men. And it's a fellowship of men and women who have to have a common problem, and that's it. And the common problem, we need to solve it. And the only way you can do it is by staying sober and helping somebody else to achieve sobriety. Sponsorship is something that people who don't have one should have an open mind to get one. It could be anybody who was like what the chairperson had spoken earlier, a person who has worked the steps, a person who has worked the AA 12 steps of recovery. And those are the people who are going to help out and do a lot of things. And, okay, to conclude, why is sponsoring so important? And why is sponsoring so important? To conclude that, if I have to sponsoring is what at the end of the day? It is like people sitting in a forest, having nothing to do, cannot know where to go, lost completely. They find one person, and that one person they have trust to lead them out of the forest. Sponsor does require a lot of leadership qualities. Sponsor starts to sing not his welfare, he looks at the common welfare. He looks at the common welfare of people who are around him. And that's how the group is. That's how the whole thing about sponsoring goes about. He not only thinks about what happens when the sponsee gets well. When the sponsee starts to do well in recovery, the rippling effect goes into his family. His family gets better. When the family gets better, he gets better, his work gets better. It's an overall rippling effect throughout society if the sponsee starts to do so well in life. I have seen quite a few of my sponsees, I'm very blessed to have them in my life, who have actually achieved certain things after they did their step work, which I'm extremely proud of. Families have been mended. They have done fantastic in their careers. They have been helping out others to do so many things. If I don't help another person today, if a sponsor does not spread, this whole concept of sponsor and sponsee was not there, the fellowship would have never grown. There would have been no AA. And that's what my feeling is, because our very essence of giving it for fun and for free is just not sitting there and going and talking to a man or a woman in the hospital and telling them about the drunken stories, but rather talking about taking that one person into the meetings, helping them go through their whole understanding of this program, and then getting them into and getting them into program itself. And once they get into the program, helping them to understand how to go about this whole thing. So it is a huge, very important aspect about sponsoring. And it is something that, like I said, without sponsorship and sponsoring, AA will not have grown at all. It would have stagnated. We wouldn't have been able to achieve that kind of recovery, that quality of recovery we find today. And we will not have found some outstanding, beautiful members contributing a lot today in the fellowship. And all comes down to that little steering wheel in the car, that little rudder in the boat, the little electrician who starts to put the connects the wire. These are the people. This is the type of sponsorship that takes our fellowship to the next level. How has sponsoring helped me? It made me a better person. It has made me feel much more better. As a person, I realized I need a lot of things to be changed. The more I talk to my sponsees, the more I realize how much I need to change. The more I start talking to, when I talk to my sponsor, he tells me how I need to change, And in the end, it makes my life or me as a person a better person. And I think that is the most important thing today in our recovery program. Especially if I'm going to be in a program and say I'm going to be 17 and a half years in recovery, and if I have not changed, then I should not have been 17 and a half years in recovery. I have to change. And the only way I can change is through my sponsor and sponsoring others. I think I've spoken a lot now, and my friend here is nodding and saying, okay, Bhasskar, enough, keep your mouth shut. Okay, so with that, I'm going to throw the meeting open for questions.